We are back, and we are going to continue today to discuss our most recent rescuer that we're looking at in the book of Judges, and that is Gideon. Last week we read chapter 6, and I stopped toward the end of chapter 6, and I'm not going to read that. I want you to turn to chapter 7, but I am going to discuss it just briefly. Okay, so at the end of the lesson last week, here's where we were. God had found Gideon in a wine press, hiding out, trying to thresh wheat for his family, for his people, and in secret, because the enemy, the Midianites, were large in number, and they had been oppressing the Israelites, stealing from the Israelites for years. And so these people had become hidden in caves, trying to just survive and live off of the day-to-day, whatever sustenance they could get a hold of before it was taken from them. And so God calls out to Gideon and calls him to win the battle over this enemy. And we saw Gideon question God and explain that he was from the lowest tribe and from the lowest family in his tribe, and he was the youngest, and he was trying to explain to God that he didn't think he had the right person. And how often do we do that? But we find that God answers his questions along the way, encourages him. And so the last thing we talked about last week was when he tore down the altar of Baal and the Asherah pole that his father had built for their little village, and the people were coming after to kill him. They wanted to kill Gideon for tearing down the idols, which is crazy because they're supposed to be following God. That's just how far off they had gotten. But his father, who realized he was wrong, says, let Baal fight for himself. If he's a real God, let him step up and fight for himself. So he's basically admitting he knew that was an object and it was not something that could save itself, because he knew his son would be fine. So we see a change of heart in the dad. We see a new altar built to Jehovah Shalom, is the name that Gideon gave to that altar. The Lord is peace. And so we ended there with him blowing his shofar, his trumpet. What they call a trumpet in the Old Testament is not a trumpet like we see in the Coffee County High School band that's brass. That's not what the trumpet is in the Bible. Sometimes we have a tendency to read something and put it into our day and time. So they didn't know how to make an object like that. So when they say there's a trumpet blown, it was what was called a shofar, and it was a ram's horn that they had carved out, and they would blow and sound, and it just made this big woo. It just made a massive sound. And what the shofar signified was two things in the Old Testament. It either signified a calling to come to the temple for Sunday school and church, or it signified a call to battle, a battle charge. So if you ever heard a shofar blow, you either thought, uh-oh, we're fixing to go into battle, or God is calling our attention to come meet and hear from the priest or the prophet or something. So it was a very significant sound. It was not just blown randomly all the time. You blew it for a specific reason. So we ended with the story about him tearing down the altar, and then he gets his shofar and blows it and calls for the surrounding tribes of Israel to come join him to defeat the Midianites. And that's where we stop. So if you stop there, you get this feeling of Gideon's getting it. Gideon is, he's ready to go. He might have torn the altar down in secret in the nighttime, but he's come out boldly during the day to proclaim that God is peace and God is going to be their victor, and he blows the shofar and has a call for battle. So then we get into this next story where we see Gideon say, okay, God, I'm gonna do this for you. However, I'm still not real certain I can do this. So he puts out a fleece And what a fleece was it was sheep's wool that had been gathered, little tuft of wool that had been sheared off a sheep. And he challenges God, and he says, "Okay, God, I'm gonna put out this fleece. I just need a little bit more confirmation from you." Now he's seen God. Has he not seen God? Remember, he saw God, and we talked about the God burning up the sacrifice and accepting the sacrifice from him. So he's seen God, and he's seen God move at this new altar. He has seen the people rally around him, and I think he was confident in what he was going to do. And then all the warriors start coming up. The people ready to fight, hear the battle, the shofar, they come up, and all of a sudden Gideon's feeling real small. So you got 32,000 soldiers that come to fight. So Gideon sees all these people coming and looking up to him. That can be daunting for anybody. It can be very daunting. Like you give a call and you know, can anybody come help me? And usually 2 or 3 show up. He's got 32,000 show up, and they're looking at him for direction. So he just takes just a little step back, just a moment, and says, okay. You know, I need some more assurance. And we do that so often with God. We need, you know, we feel a confirmation in our spirit. We know God's supposed to do something, but then we're like, God, just confirm it with 2 or 3 people, please. I just want to be sure. And so I don't think that Gideon was wavering. Here's where I feel like this is taken out of context. I don't feel like he was wavering in his decision. Okay? He had made the decision, or he would not have blown the shofar. I feel like he just needed some extra pats on the back, okay, to just encourage him to move forward. And so he says, I'm going to put this fleece out tonight, God, and if I'm supposed to do this and we're going to win this battle, when I wake up, I want the fleece to be wet and the ground to be dry. I think that's right. If y'all read, was that the first one, wasn't it? Okay. So he wakes up the next morning and the fleece is moist and the ground is dry. And he wrings it out and to prove, okay? Now I want y'all to understand, he's not doing this in secret. He's doing this in front of the army. So I think it wasn't as much, you know, it was for him to be assured by God, but I think he wanted to prove to them, because they weren't there when he was talking to God in the wine press. You see what I'm saying? They weren't there when God did these things through him. And so this fleece is more for them to see God has chosen him so that they can support him in battle. And he wrings it out and they see that. So I don't know what prompts this next thing, except that I can just hear some of the guys saying, that don't prove nothing to me, because you can get up down here in South Georgia and the humidity, if something like fleece, will be wet and the ground will be dry. So I think somebody there was some little naysayers maybe saying something about, you know, that doesn't prove anything. So Gideon goes back to God and is like, okay, God, one more time I'm going to put this fleece out, and I want you to do the impossible, and that's keep the fleece dry but wet the ground. And that was impossible, right? If moisture, humidity set in enough to wet the ground, there is no way that fleece would be dry. Y'all know the texture of that. It's going to soak up the moisture before the ground is. So he gets up the next morning and the fleece is totally dry. And so he gets a double confirmation there through the fleece to move on and do what I've called you to do. And the soldiers, you know, rallied around him. We have taken that story out of context. How many times, I've done it myself, how many times have we said, okay, I'm trying to make a decision, I'm going to put out a fleece. Have you ever said that? I mean, let's be honest. I'm going to put out a fleece, all right? And I'm not saying you put out a real fleece, but we use that as symbolic. Like, I'm going to put out a fleece and just ask God to confirm through something. You know, do you say, okay, God, if I'm supposed to have, you know, if I'm supposed to have a Jeep Grand Cherokee, when I walk out here, there's going to be one driving through the parking lot. I hope you don't do that. But I know people that have done things like that before. They're trying to put out a fleece. They're trying to say, I know I need a car, but I really would like a Jeep. So God, if you're going to give me a Jeep, show me a Jeep when I go out here. And they take that as a big sign. And sometimes we have a tendency to want signs without God. Are y'all listening to me? Why do we seek signs when we've got God Almighty in charge of us? Do we need a sign? Sometimes He gives us signs. I'm not saying He doesn't, but it's for confirmation. It's not to give you an answer. I want you to hear me. When you pray to God and you seek God, you will get an answer. It will either be yes, no, or it might be not yet. Are you following me? But I ain't got to put a fleece out. You know, God, if I'm supposed to go on the trip, let me win the lottery tomorrow. Those are what I'm talking about, have been misconstrued concepts of this fleece concept, of putting out a fleece. I need to put out a fleece because I'm not sure about this. Now, God will give us confirmation through His Word. He will give us confirmation through wise saints that have served Him through the years, that have seen the faithfulness of God, that know what God can do. He can give us confirmation that way. He also can answer our prayers just by the consecration of our life. If you are consecrating your life and you're trying to live a consecrated, holy life before God, you don't have to question, okay? You just take steps. God will direct your steps, right? And so this fleece putting out, it became a movement for a while back when I was a young mama, where it was called the prosperity principle of just like, okay, God, and I'm not going to name a name of a pastor, but I heard him one time say, do you not trust God to give you every little thing? If you're looking for a this is what he said, if you're looking for a parking space when you go to Walmart and you can't find one, you can pray and say, God, open up a parking space for me in the front, because you know I can't walk from the back of the parking lot. And this is what he said, I promise you, you drive around and there will be a space for you. You trust God to give you a parking space. Well, that may be true. If I drive around for a long time, somebody's going to be pulling out, right? Now, is that the favor of God? I don't know. Or is that just my persistence or being, patient? I don't know. I'm not saying He won't give you a parking spot. I'm not saying He doesn't care about our smallest needs. The point I'm trying to make is we don't test God. We don't say things like that. We trust God in our day-to-day walk to meet our needs, whatever they are, and He knows what's best for us. So if you're putting out fleeces, I want to just say why. I want to question you a little bit. Why? Are you doing it for the right reasons, or are you trusting a fleece more than you're trusting God Himself? You don't have to answer that for me. I just want you to answer that in your heart. We don't have to put fleeces out. Keep in mind what I told you last week. They did not have the written word to read. They did not have pastors and weekly meetings on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, small groups, Bible studies like this. They did not have ways to hear from God. Now, I want to go a little bit further with this fleece, and I've got a lot to say about chapter 7, so y'all just bear with me. I don't think it was inappropriate what Gideon did because of the culture he was in, the time he was in. Like I said, he did not have other tools like we do to hear directly from God. And you got to understand, this is in the time where the priest wore the Urim and the Thummim. I think I'm saying it right. Okay, I don't have any of this written down, so I'm just trying to go off the top of my head. What was that? This was something God directed the priest when they served in the temple. They would wear what's called an ephod. It was like almost like a bulletproof vest that we see FBI or somebody wearing today. It was a big thing they put over their head and wore breastplate to cover their chest, and it had all these different things that God had instructed them to put on there. Some of it represented the 12 tribes, different jewels, but they had these things called the Urim and the Thummim, and God instructed the priest when they were trying to make a decision, when the people went to the priest and asked, for God's help or asked for direction, God instructed them to put out the Urim and the Thummim, and he would select the answer. So that came straight from God Almighty. So I want you to keep in mind, Gideon is oppressed. They don't have a temple to worship in. They are hiding in caves and dens and whatever. And I feel like he was just doing what he knew God had instructed leaders to do when they had a question that needed answered. So he was basically putting out the Urim and the Thummim. And so he wasn't being like what I was just talking about. He wasn't like just throwing a fleece out there without believing God. Is that settling something in your spirit a little bit? Because we want to believe Gideon had made the decision, and I believe he had. And I believe the fleece was something common that they would do as they were trying to move in a direction for God. God had already instructed the priest to put these things out so he could give them an answer. And God answered Gideon. If he didn't want Gideon to use a fleece, he would have said, I'm not doing that. You already know what I've asked you to do. He didn't say that. He gave an answer. And it was proof to Gideon and to his soldiers that God had chosen him. And I think these soldiers needed to know that God had chosen him because of what he said in the very beginning. I'm the least of the least. People are not going to look at me. Because in our flesh, who do we look for to lead us? Not the least of the least. But that's who God always calls, right? So I hope that gives you some clarity. So the next time you hear somebody say, well, let's put a fleece out, I want you to say, hang on a minute. Let's talk about this fleece. Don't take that out of context. We've just taken that totally out of context in this day and time where we say that so often. I think I just need to put a fleece out to God. No. Just trust God. Just follow God, and he will give you your answer. Okay? So I hope that helps with the fleece, because Gideon had made his decision. He had blown the trumpet. And so for a long time I thought, well, if Gideon had decided he was going to do this and he calls the soldiers to him, why would he then question God? It was not a matter of questioning God. He had already accepted the decision. He was seeking confirmation. Okay? There's a difference. There's a big difference there. So I hope you're following me and all that. All right? Now, let's look at chapter 7. Judges chapter 7. And there's so much more about Gideon that I'm going to try to cover today. All right, so let's read this together. I'm reading from the New King James. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the well of Herod, so that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by the hill of Morah in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel claim glory for itself against me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Now therefore, proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart at once from Mount Gilead. And 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. But the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. Then it will be that of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, and the same shall go with you, and of whomever I say to you, this one shall not go with you, the same shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, have everyone who laps from the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set apart by himself. Likewise, everyone who gets down on his knees to drink. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men, but all the rest of the people got down on their knees to drink water. Then the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men who laughed, I will save you, and deliver the Midianites into your hands. Let all the other people go, every man to his own place. So the people took their provisions and their trumpets in their hands, and he sent away all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, and retained 300 men. Now the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. Now I'm going to stop there before we get into what happens next. Okay, so he had 10,000 after he asked for those that were scared to leave. So they saw the fleece. They had come at the call of the trumpet. They saw the testing of the fleece that God confirmed Gideon, and yet they were still afraid. And so God said, if they're fearful, tell them to go. Okay, so from the 32,000, only 10,000 were left. 20,000 walked off. Okay. Why would he say, if you're scared, leave, when he needed all the help he could get? Well, do you not know that fear is contagious? You're better off fighting with 2 than 20 that are scared and start stirring up the camp. This is what happened with Goliath. They had a huge army coming against the Philistines. All of David's brothers, and remember what his brothers looked like? Remember when Samuel went to anoint the king, and he's looking at these big, buff, tall, gorgeous brothers, and he's thinking God's going to anoint them. And he goes down the line, and God says, no, 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 no. Well, you told me one of these sons is going to be king. Where is he? He's out. He's the little one out keeping sheep. Go get him. And Samuel was like, what? You know, it's not what he expected. Those brothers were out with the army of Israel. They weren't fighting. That's saying it very lightly. They were supposed to be fighting the Philistines who had come to attack them. But they were all sitting around in their camp, cowering in fear, because this mighty Goliath and all his, what I call bling, his big fancy sword and whatever, his helmet and all this fancy stuff, and he's a giant, he's just mouthing at them. He's prancing, getting up every morning, prancing across, over them and shouting at them and calling them whatever, and fear swept through the camp. All it takes is one negative person to create a disaster. David comes along. What are y'all doing? Why is everybody laying around? He was just supposed to be bringing food to his family, checking on his brothers. They're all laying around. We're scared. Look up there. Look at Goliath. David didn't stop to listen to any comments. He never stopped. I ain't got no time for this negative stuff. Y'all should be trusting God. So he goes after Goliath, and what does he say with his little slingshot? Goliath says, y'all sending me a little puppy dog? You think he's gonna kill me? Blah blah. He's still just prancing and mouthing. He never once slayed any of them. I want y'all to understand this. Goliath never once drew his sword against any Israelite. He scared them with his mouth and his prancing. And it's just ridiculous. David's like, why are y'all cowering here in fear? And he doesn't listen to them. And what he says to Goliath, when Goliath says, y'all send me this little peon, you think he's going, he thought it was hilarious. And David says, well, you come to me with a sword and a spear, but I come to you in the name of Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. And he is going to show you who he is today. Bam. And he's dead. In a short amount of time, this little kid with a slingshot shuts the mouth up of this mouther that had put fear throughout the whole camp of Israel. It's happening still today. It takes one person in your home or one person in your church to start talking junk and negative and mess. And it starts spreading like wildfire, and next thing you know, everybody's cowering in fear, and they haven't even been attacked yet. And you think about it, it's really funny because Jehovah had always shown himself faithful to his chosen people. And they doubted him because the giant was there mouthing off. We see this here. There's no giant yet, but they know the Midianites are as numerous. Remember what it says? The Midianites were as numerous as the locusts. Like hordes of locusts and their camels and all. They had so much stuff that these 32,000 saw that they were coming against 135,000. That's how many Midianites there were. So even though it looks like Gideon's call rallied the troops, there were only 32,000 against 135,000. The odds are not good there. So when Gideon says, all right, we're going to kill these people. If you're scared, you need to leave. 20,000 walk off because of being fearful of what they see. They hadn't even been attacked yet. Same thing as David and Goliath. 10,000 stayed. So there was something in the 10,000 that believed in God and believed in Gideon to stay. And God says, so can you imagine Gideon gets like, okay, God, you whittled this down 10,000. Now this is, I'm not sure like, are you sure you know what you're doing? I mean, look at this enemy down here. Look at all of them. And now 20,000 of my guys have walked off. I'm sure he was a little skeptical, but he's still like, okay, God, I'm listening. So then God goes even further. You still have too many. What? What are you talking about? You still have too many. So he gives him this little scenario and tells him, you go tell them all to get a drink of water. They're tired. They're getting rallied for a battle. They need some water. And Gideon didn't know what he was doing, so he couldn't instruct them what to do. He just said, all right, y'all go down here to this river and drink and get refreshed before we move on. And so God picks the ones, only 300 of them did not kneel on their knees and put their face in the water, all the way in the water, and just drink it straight up from the source. Only 300 of them got down and did like this. And he says they lapped like a dog. Now some people say he called them dogs. He did not call them a dog. Okay, you read it word for word. He was just saying the ones who lap like a dog. So when you see a dog, when I give my little dog water in the morning, in his little bowl, he doesn't stick his head down in there. He sticks his tongue out and he's looking at me and he's looking around, he's making sure nobody's stealing his water, right? So he's like being very observant because he don't want nobody messing with his stuff. That's what they were doing. They never dropped their eyes from the attention of what was going on around them. Okay? It's very important to understand what was happening here. So the rest of the 10,000 get down in the water, and they're just having a good old party and drinking and whatever and getting refreshed. And somebody could have come up behind them and chopped their head off. Because they weren't looking at nothing but got their faces in the water. So I believe the ones that were laughing were the few good men, that God noticed something in them, that they were going to be the ones to be on high alert and do exactly what Gideon tells them to do. Because they never dropped guard. They never dropped their guard from what was around them. So they got their water, but they did it a little different. That's what a soldier would do. They would never drop their attention from their surroundings. So Gideon is left with 300, a remnant of 32,000. 300 men, and he begins to think, God, I took this assignment, but I didn't realize this was what it was going to be. You're telling me we're going to defeat 135,000 tough, strong guys that have plenty of food and have stolen stuff for years from us? I mean, these guys had reservoirs, okay, what we call reservoirs of fat to sustain them. They didn't. Gideon and his boys were very, I mean, they were strong, but they were thin. They survived day by day, which made them a little bit tougher, honestly. But we see God say yes, and he said, my purpose in this is so that you will not get the glory. And how often we want to be the ones figuring out how to fix something, and the whole time God is saying, that's not the way I operate in you. This is going to give me glory, and I'm going to show you how. You can't say it was me. And there was no way with 300 men, if they won this battle, anybody could say it was anybody but God. So he's got 300, and God separates them out. And so here we go. So let's keep on reading now from what's happening next. Verse 9. It happened on the same night. So during the day they had stopped to drink. Okay, it brought people to the water. It was still daytime. And they saw the camp of Midian below them in the valley. So it happened at night, on the same night that the Lord said to him, go down, arise, go down against the camp, for I have delivered it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands will be strengthened to go down against the camp. Then he went down with Purah his servant to the outpost of the armed men who were in the camp. Now the Midianites and Amalekites, all the people of the east, were lying in the valley as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number as the sand by the seashore in multitude. And when Gideon had come, there was a man telling a dream to his companion. He said, I have had a dream. To my surprise, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian. It came to a tent and struck it so that it fell and overturned, and the tent collapsed. Then his companion answered and said, this is nothing else but the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God has delivered Midian and the whole camp. That's a Midianite giving an interpretation of the dream. And so it was when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation that he worshipped. And he returned to the camp of Israel, and he said, arise, for the Lord has delivered the camp of Midian into your hand. All right, we'll stop there. Okay, so here we see part of God's strategic battle plan. And on your paper, I've got A, B, and C. The first one was to whittle them down to 300 by the lapping of the water. The second one was to send Gideon down into the camp secretly so that he could be encouraged and strengthened to do what God had called him to do. And so we see him and his servant go down, and it's dark, right? So all the Midianites are in their tents. And apparently it's been dark for a little bit because this person's already had a dream. And so these two guys in this tent, this guy wakes up and is like, I just had a dream and I don't understand it, but I'm scared. Something about this dream is bothering me. And his fellow Midianite interprets the dream. Only God could have given him this interpretation. But it shows you that prior to Gideon even knowing anything about what was going on in the camp, somebody had stirred something up about Gideon in this camp. God was already making himself known, and it was like the gossip game. Somebody's like, this man Gideon just called a trumpet. Do y'all know who he is? And before you know it, it's all over the camp. This man is God's on his side. and I don't even know if they'd heard about the fleece. I don't know what they had heard, but something had stirred them up. So they already have a little bit of fear of Gideon already in the camp. And then this guy says, this is Gideon. He's fixing to destroy us. Now, where in the world did he get that interpretation from a tumbleweed of barley, rolling onto a tent? Well, the significance of that was barley at this day and time, in this time of Gideon, barley was eaten by the poorest of the poor. Only the poor ate the barley. Midianites would not have eaten barley. Okay, so barley was just, the last resort to stay alive. So they knew that all the Israelites they had oppressed didn't have anything left but barley seeds, really, to try to meal or whatever to eat. So immediately when he says this big thing of barley's rolling down into our camp, they of course thought that's the Israelites, because we don't eat that stuff. Only the poor people eat that. So that was a representation of Gideon and his people. Guess what the tent represented? Well, they were in a tent. The tents, which the Israelites were not living in, they were in the caves hiding. The tents represented the Midianites. That's what they lived in. So this was a pretty obvious dream to interpret if you realize the context of how they saw it. Barley represents the Israelites. That's the poor, oppressed people. And the tent represents us. We're the people living in tents that had the camels. And what does the barley do? It rolls down from the hill. Remember, Gideon's up on the hill. They know Gideon's got, they don't know how many he's got. They know he's up there because they're getting prepared to battle him. So they see this barley roll down from where Gideon is down and crush the tent. And that was a sign that God was fixing to give Gideon the victory. So Gideon goes back up, encouraged by that, realizing his name has been spread throughout the camp, and they're fearful already, and he can call his guys, it's time to go, let's go. They're scared of us, the timing is now. He pulled a David, it's like, we're not waiting till the morning. Battles were not fought during the night. That's why the Midians were asleep in their tents or just hanging out and drinking and whatever they were doing. They were waiting for the battle to happen the next morning. Battles were not fought at night. But Gideon goes down, he hears this, and God says, okay, I've shown you, you've got the victory, let's go. And he calls the 300 to him and says, this is what we just saw, so let's keep reading. Okay, so verse 13. Oh, I'm sorry. Not 13. All right, let's go to verse 15. So it was when Gideon heard, I think I read this already, let's read it again. When he heard the sound of the dream interpretation, he worshiped, and he worshiped. He stopped and worshiped God. That's important. He worshiped, then he returned to the camp and said, arise, for the Lord has delivered them into our hand. This is what he did. Then he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet into every man's hand with empty pitchers and torches inside the pitchers. And he said to them, look at me and do likewise. Watch, and when I come to the edge of the camp, you shall do as I do. When I blow my trumpet, I and all who are with me will also blow your trumpets on every side of the whole camp and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outposts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. Just as they had posted the watch, they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers. They held the torches in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands for blowing, and they cried, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And every man stood in his place all around the camp, and the whole army ran and cried out and fled. And when the 300 blew the trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his companion throughout the whole camp. And the army fled to Beth Acacia toward, I don't know how I'm saying, towards Arar, as far as the border of Abel Maholah by Tabith. And the men of Israel gathered together from Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh, and pursued the Midianites. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout Ephraim and said, "Come down against the Midianites, seize from them the watering places as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan." Then all the men of Ephraim gathered together, seized the watering places, and they captured the 2 princes of the Midianites, and they killed them. They killed both of them. They pursued Midian and brought the heads of Orb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side of the Jordan. What? Wow. Okay, so, wow. This was not a battle fought with strength and might of the flesh. Every rescuer, God has used a different way. A different way. And I just love it because it just shows you God, you can't predict God. There is no pattern to what He does because He's God. And every one of us is different. And every one of our circumstances is different. And what He did to help one person through their circumstances, He's going to do differently for you in your circumstance. Everything He does in us, everything and anything He does in us is to bring Him glory. So I'm telling you, you might could tell me He did something for you similar to somebody else, and that's great. He does do things similar in His healing, but it's never exactly the same. It's never exactly the same. Why? Because He never wants us to say, well, that happened that way, so-and-so, but so I think it just happened to me. We're not giving God credit for doing something impossible in our lives. And so I love this. Gideon has a little bit of Othniel, a little bit of Shamgar, a little bit of, what was the other one? Ehud. I've already forgotten which day. Ehud. He's got a little bit of these guys. So he's got some strength. We know he's got some strength from stomping in the wine press and all. But we also know that he's got a brilliant mind. God has given him some wisdom. And this was not a battle with blood and gore and a sword fight. It was a psychological battle. It was a very strategic psychological warfare. I don't know if you noticed this. I've never noticed this until I was studying this lesson for y'all today. But his army did not have weapons. They did not have swords. What were they carrying? I always thought they had swords. I don't know why. I just thought, well, they might have had something strapped to them, but their hands were full. They carried shofars in their right hand and the light lamp with the torch or whatever in their left hand. And that tells me too also that the Benjamites were not fighting with them. You remember why? The Benjamites were left-handed fighters. Okay? So that's just a little side note. But it was the tribes surrounding him that came to help because they lived great distances from each other. But anyway, God instructs them. You carry the shofar in this hand. You carry the light, and the clay pot in this hand. Why did He instruct them to carry in the left hand? Because these guys were right-handed. They've got to break that pot open. They couldn't have done it with the weaker hand. That there's purpose in everything God instructs us to do. Nothing is just like fate or by chance or just luck. He gave them specific instructions so that they could win this battle strategically. And he instructs Gideon, and Gideon gives them the plan. Here's the plan. I've just come from the camp. They are fearful of us. God's already shown them that we're fixing to come down out of the mountains and destroy them. And so I'm going to send groups of y'all all around this camp. Remember, it's still dark. It's the middle of the night watch. And he says, I don't know how they could see him. I don't know if he had his torch lit and he just crept down. But somehow they could see Gideon as he went down the mountain. They followed him so that they would know when he gives them the alarm, when he's in place. But he goes down. He says, I want you to do what I do. When I blow the trumpet and you blow your trumpets, you crack open that clay pot and you shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Really loud. So these Midianites are half asleep, most of them are asleep, it's the middle of the night, and they place themselves around. So when the trumpets start blowing, remember what I told y'all early on today. A shofar did not blow unless somebody was under attack. You were under attack. They didn't just blow one like you normally do, or just have a few people blowing it to signify. Every 300 shofars start going off at the same time. What a mighty sound around the camp of Midian. It scares them all away. They think, oh, the army is upon us, and they start coming out of their tents, and all of a sudden they see lights surrounding them. So, if you go back and study the battle that happens back then, there would be groups of soldiers that were led by one light. This is what normally happened back then in their battles. So you would have a leader that would blow a shofar and raise the torch, and there was probably thousands of people in his troop behind him. So the Midianites, they're awakened by 300 shofars thinking, okay, that's 300 times 10,000 behind each shofar. You following my train of thought? They thought that each one of these guys, these 300 guys, had a massive troop behind them, fixing to just come down on top of them. And they saw all those lights, and each light signified the large troop as well. What a brilliant, when you know you're defeated in numbers, what a brilliant psychological strategic plan that God gave Gideon to win the victory. And yet Gideon's men still could not go back and said, we did it. They didn't do anything but blow a trumpet and break a clay pot and shine their light. And they killed each other. And they stood on the mountain and watched it. That's the kind of battle I like fight. Don't get my hands dirty. Let me just raise my light. And God, you just take care of it, right? I ain't got no cuts or nothing. My God is so good. He just did that while I stood still. And he does operate that way sometimes. Sometimes he asks us to be still and know that I am God. But it's just a powerful thing. And I got so interested in this whole thing, trying to think, how could they have had a lit torch under a clay pot and carrying that with a shofar, which was a pretty big, ram's horn in this hand, and pull that all off at the same time. And I'm going to tell you, if you ever played a band instrument, I played clarinet. And my first lesson, I couldn't blow worth nothing. I couldn't figure out how to get a sound out of that thing. I tried flute first, that was even worse. And we got anybody that plays a flute in here? Bless your ever-loving heart. You have got some powerful lungs. You have no idea how much breath and strength you have to play a flute. But it took me lessons and at least a year to begin to learn how to blow properly through that reed, and make a sound and get notes and everything before I could play in the band, in the marching band or whatever. It took practice. Have you ever tried to blow a shofar? Anybody in here ever tried to blow a shofar? Oh my goodness. My friend Stephanie Wiggins, who is now in heaven with Jesus, she knew how to blow a shofar. I went with her to Bethlehem, and we had some meetings where we asked her to blow the shofar to signify the meeting, the start of the meeting. Just powerful sound, powerful. And she had it in our room, and I was messing around with it. I'm just, Stephanie, how in the world you play this? She said, it takes practice and technique. I never could. She tried to show me how to hold my lips and do this a certain way, and I'm just going, it was like, I would be a terrible, troop leader. If I had to blow a shofar for y'all to know it's time to fight, we'd be dead. I couldn't do it. the strength these men had in their lungs to all blow that sound at the same time. You ever heard a train horn? You ever been right side of a train when they blow their horn? Think about 300 of those. Whoa! I mean, this camp just woke up. Just when you wake up from a dream, you're hearing something. You just all out of sorts. Then they come out of their tent, they see lights everywhere. Like, oh, we're under attack, run! And they're drawing their swords, and they just start killing each other. But the clay pot, when I looked it up, the pots that the archaeologists had found from that time period, they weren't giant flower pots that you can't, that you couldn't live. It was a pitcher. It had a handle, and it was a pitcher that they would use to draw water with. But the torch is not a big torch like you see in Indiana Jones or whatever, where they've got these big long torches and they're going through a dark cave and it's got to have a long torch so it doesn't burn your hand because it's got to last a long time. This is not what they had. They had smaller torches, which would be more like a candlestick kind of thing. You ever seen the Dickens Christmas Carol when he comes out and he's got like the little metal candle holder with a candle on it and he's holding it? They would be similar to that. It would have been a torch inside that pitcher that was mounted to something, okay? So as they're breaking the pitcher, it doesn't fall on the ground, but the light comes out, the light source. And it said that they would keep that torch in there with just enough air that it didn't die out, but it was not burning too bright. So what happened is, when Gideon makes that call and says, sound the shofar, break your pots, as they broke those pots, the air hit those torches and it lit up. You ever see somebody trying to kindle a fire and get a fire going? What do? They don't blow it out, but they put little puffs. You ever seen Survivor or whatever? They just puff it a little bit, and it lit. All of a sudden, it just lights the whole stack of wood. It just starts burning brightly. And this is what happened with their torches. So you couldn't see them while they were inside the clay, but as soon as the clay was broken and air entered in, they lit up all around the mountain. It's just what a beautiful scene. I mean, light in the darkness, right? And God wins that battle, and they haven't even raised a sword. They did not use one sword, one spear, one dagger, nothing. And then when they realize they've all killed each other, and a few of them are scattered, and they chase them, it doesn't say they chase them, but they end up killing. They end up dying. And then in Ephraim, remember Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, is Manasseh's brother. These are Joseph's boys. Remember I was talking about that last week? These are Joseph's boys. So he calls for his brother tribe, Ephraim. Hey, the two princes have got away. They're entering your land. Can you help me, brother? And they come down and kill the princes for him. So all's dead. They're all dead. And it's just the coolest, this is the coolest thing that only God could possibly do. And so they come back victorious to the rest of the tribes, and Gideon becomes the next peacekeeper, the next judge, the next leader. And guess how many years of peace they had? 40. Most of these judges have 40 years of peace. One of them had 80, which is 2 40s, right? He has 40 years of peace. And so God uses a scattering and using only 300. He separates out the beginning 32,000 down to 300. That's the first strategy of his battle plan. The second one is to send Gideon to the camp so that he can be encouraged by this dream interpretation. And the third thing is the torches and the shofars and the planning of the people around, planting those guys all around in the dark so that the Midians thought there was 300,000 coming against them, not 300. And so what a strategic battle plan. Sometimes when we are facing some hard stuff, we want the blood and gore type of victory. We think God's going to just come out and and just show himself. And he doesn't operate that way a lot of times, not in my life. It's the quiet strategy. It's the wait on me. Be of good cheer, be of good courage, wait on me, and I will strengthen your heart. Or be still and know that I am God. Let me be in the front. I am Jehovah Sabaoth. David called him out. David said, I know I can't do this in my strength, and Goliath, to you I look like a little wimp. But I'm not coming to you in my strength. I'm coming to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. And let me show you what he can do. Gideon came in the name of the one who called him. Lord Almighty, Jehovah Shalom, brought peace into his land for 40 years because of what he did. What a powerful, powerful, encouraging word for us today. I want to close by reading a scripture to you that just kind of ties this all in. For me, I feel the relationship here between what happened in this battle to my life. And it's 2 Corinthians 4, 6, and 7. It says, 2 Corinthians 4, 6, and 7, if you're writing it down. When I start reading this, some of you are going to be familiar with this, but it says, for God who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Amen? Amen. We are jars of clay, and God Almighty has to strike us sometimes and break us for his light to shine forth in the darkness. And praise God, he does. Break me, God. Break that shell, that hardened shell that I create around myself sometimes, and let your light shine out to this world of darkness and kill those Midianites in the name of Jesus. 2 Corinthians 4, 6, and 7. Kim, is that what you were asking?
I was going to ask you if you would go question 2 and 3 with us.
Okay. All right, so y'all remember that verse. Okay, question 2 and 3 had to do with the fleece. All right, and I'll answer that when I cut off the video in a minute. Okay, for you online audience, I'm cutting y'all off, but be encouraged today. You are the light of the world. Do not hide the light of God, but let it shine brightly. You're a light on a hill, the word says. Let that light shine so that others will know God is God, and they will know who Jesus is. We are not going to do chapter 8. I'm going to mention it next week briefly as we go into the next rescuers. Chapter 8 is the end of Gideon's life, and it's not as good as chapter 7, but we will discuss it a little bit and see what the Israelites start doing, and then we'll see Gideon die, and we'll move on to the next 2 people. So you can read chapter 8. I want you to read it, but I want you to go on to chapter 9 a little bit to catch the next 2 names. We're going to do 2 guys next week at the same time because they're barely mentioned. Okay, but I'm going to bring out some stuff about them. Tola and Jair. Okay, that's who we're going to discuss next week. Tola and Jair. Be blessed, and I will see you next Tuesday. Bye.